Hello, BookTube. Well, it's what we used to call a bleak and barren Sunday on this channel. That used to be my whining term for Sundays forever, because on Sundays I got no mail. And that means no free books. And recently I dropped that term because Sundays are going to be the days when we do our read-alongs. We've had so much fun doing read-alongs on this channel. At least I have, and you've said that you enjoy them too. But I'm not doing any read-alongs for December. And that leaves Sundays wide open, and we have a couple more of them to go before we don't have any more in 2018. And what I used to do to console myself on Sundays was to do a tag. And I have a backlog of tags, including a foodie tag from Josh at Literary Gladiators. Imagine being so backlogged that I'm letting such a thing sit, especially when it is a rant fest. Their current Literary Gladiators food tag is a Steve rant fest. You'd think I'd be jumping all over that, but the tag I'm going to do today isn't that. It's a tag by our very own Dark Prince of BookTube 2.0, Adam at Memento Mori, and he tagged me, which was very nice. I don't expect he tagged all of the cool kids on BookTube 2.0, all of the new aristocracy, and I was on that list, and that amazed me for some reason. But anyway, it's called the BookTube Postscript for 2018, and it's a look back, and I do that at this time of year, so I thought it would be fun. I'll try and keep the video nice and brief. If it's an Adam tag and he's already been vocal about how little patience he has with my 40-minute videos, in his honor, I'll try and keep it cheap. So number one is the longest book you read this year and the book that took you the longest to read. And in my case, those will be the same thing. And the longest book I read by far in 2018 was Carbon Ideologies by William Vollmann, which came out in two 800-page volumes, but it's clear the author wrote it as one book, intended it as one book. It had to come out as two 800-page volumes because you couldn't make it in one volume, but it very much reads as one book. And it's all about mankind's disastrous relationship with carbon fuels, with non-renewable fuel sources, and the catastrophes that it leads to, and the short-sightedness, and the damage that it does, and the end game that it produces. And the neat thing about Carbon Ideologies is that it's written as though that end game has already happened. Its conceit is that it is a love letter to a vanished species called Homo sapiens, which makes it a bizarre reading experience, and yet in 1,600 pages it never flags. It never becomes dull. It never goes into the weeds. Amazing. And it was the longest book. And it took me the longest to read because it was the longest book. Unless this question is meant to dig at a book that took you the longest time to read because you had to go back to it or you wrestled with it, in which case it wouldn't be Carbon Ideologies at all. Carbon Ideologies is dauntingly long and brilliant, but it's not confounding as a work. For me, that would be The Overstory by Richard Powers, which my opinion was all over the map about that book. When I first finished it, I was blown away by, as usual with Richard Powers, I was blown away by the rhetorical genius. This is on a line-by-line, paragraph-by-paragraph level, this is such a brilliant author. But I had the sneaking suspicion that the book itself was ridiculous. And then I wondered if maybe if maybe the book wasn't quite so ridiculous, but maybe I'd overrated the rhetorical stuff, that it was a little on the overblown side, and so on and so forth. It took months for my opinion on that book to settle. So that might count as the book that it took me the longest time to read, although I wasn't actively reading it the whole time that I was agonizing over it like that. Anyway, question number two is a book you read in 2018 that was outside your comfort zone. And I worked hard to think of an answer to this thing. And I thought, of course, about, there was a great book about mental illness that I read. The title is escaping me right at the moment. To Kill the Monster We First Make It Beautiful, or something like that. There was also The Curse of the Boyfriend Sweater, which was about crafting, which I know absolutely nothing. And there was also most of the biographies that I read in 2018. Most of the great biographies that I read were on non-canonical subjects. People that I'd never read a biography about, didn't know anything about them at all, or had all sorts of settled opinions that were negative, that were of the opinion that they didn't deserve a long new biography. And I was blown away in almost all cases, almost all of them, with only a couple of exceptions. I kept expecting that the Jackie Chan biography would fit that bill, but it was just a dud for me. But most of the others, oh my God, most of the others were. The problem I had with the question wasn't so much reading about subjects that I'm not usually reading or that I usually praise. It's the idea of comfort zone just itself. Subjects, yes, but once a subject becomes a book, books are in my comfort zone, regardless of what they're about, and regardless of how they're done. They're in my comfort zone. So that's what threw me about the question. So there were a whole bunch of books that I read in 2018 that were unconventional for me. If that's what's going to count, I, for instance, do not suffer from mental illness. No comments from the peanut gallery. You know exactly what I mean. I don't suffer from it. So books about it are a little strange for me. Of course, I don't knit. I have no sense of touch and no patience and no aesthetic sense. So I don't do anything like that. It'd be the same thing as reading a beguiling cookbook or a golf book. And I have read those. So that aspect of it, I think, counts. Then question number 3 is, how many books did you reread in 2018? This is one of the few questions on the list that is explicitly quantitative. Adam, in his video, I'll leave a link to his original video down below, he said that he wanted to stay away from explicitly quantitative questions because everybody does those at the end of the year anyway. And he wanted to stick to more evaluative stuff, more interesting stuff. This one is the only one that specifically asks for a number. How many books did you reread in 2018? And it just so happens that when it comes to books, are the only subject on which I actually do keep stats of my own. And my number is 221. I reread 221 books in 2018. Question number 4 is your favorite reread of 2018. And I have it right here. I have some props so that you're not just staring at my bulbous nose the whole time. And this is a reread, definitely. But it didn't quite feel like one. And it's an incredibly strong recommendation. It's The Diary of Anne Frank in a graphic novel adaptation, which you would think at first sounds blasphemous, but it's amazing. The adaptation is by Ari Folman, and the illustrations are by David Polonsky, and it's just amazing. It's just amazing. The artwork is just amazing. Here's Anne dreaming about the horrors that she's heard about. You get on a train and you don't come back, and she that when her family is being told when they're going to leave their home and go to the annex and hide from the authorities, she snuggles with her cat. I can't believe we're going to cuddle for the last time. And then we see the cat foraging on the table. The cat does not know that it's been abandoned. And so on and so forth throughout the whole thing. There's one night, look at this, is a double-page spread, where the family realizes that the warehouse is being burglarized. And they can't say anything, because if they alert anybody, they will be known. Their presence there will be known. And you read those passages in Anne Frank's diary, but for some reason, the illustrations here and the annotations, the version that Folman makes here was just so amazing. I mean, I'm trying to find you. I'll find you one more thing here before we go. Yes, of course, Anne falls in love and dreams of her beau as a Regency ideal. The whole time that the adaptation is going on, the text from the diary is steadily increasing. As we get closer and closer to the end, the adaptation gives us more and more of Anne herself, and it's incredible. I have read Anne Frank's diary many times, come that close to teaching it once upon a time, and this made it new. So it counts as a reread, but boy oh boy, boy oh boy, it felt new. So let's see here. Question number 5, a book you read for the first time in 2018 that you look forward to rereading, and not to beat a dead horse here, but that would be Carbon Ideologies. When Carbon Ideologies eventually gets to me in 2 phone book size trade paperbacks, I'm sure that I will get them. I might even be blurbed on them. And when it gets to me, I'm going to reread the whole thing. I've come to the determination in the last few years that is the only thing to do for me with enormous books. The Stephen Kotkin Stalin biography volumes that are 1,000 pages each. Carbon Ideologies, when the House of Government comes out in trade paperback, sometime in early 2019, I think, is coming out in trade paperback. I'm pretty sure it'll have a blurb by me, and I will reread the whole thing. Even though it's a huge chunk of time, a huge investment. When it's a book that big, you really have to. So I look forward to rereading Carbon Ideologies, probably more than once. Question number 6 is a favorite single short story or novella in 2018. I couldn't do it. BookTube, I couldn't narrow it down to one. But I do read lots and lots of short stories. Most contemporary fiction short stories sicken me. And most mystery short stories that I read in like the Strand magazine or something like that are pretty pro forma. They scratch an itch, but they don't ever, that crackle of electricity that I always talk about is not there when you read things like that. And I haven't found I found venues online for good romance short stories, but I haven't found a good venue in print for them. But science fiction and fantasy, very different thing. Science fiction and fantasy, of course, was born in short stories. In the modern incarnation was born. It was created by William Campbell in short form. There's a part of me still, atavistically, even now, that considers a science fiction or fantasy novel to be weird. I think of them naturally as short stories. And I subscribe to science fiction magazines, to 3 of them. Analog, Asimov Science Fiction and Science Fiction and Fantasy. I subscribe to those 3. And in every single issue of each one of those 3, there is at least one story that makes my hair stand up, that gives me that electric jolt. I wanted to go through 3 of them with you now, because I couldn't narrow it down to just one. The first one is in Analog. And it is a short story called Open Source Space by C. Stuart Hardwick, which is just a gift to old NASA fans like me. It's about generational things. The main character is a woman whose ancestor went into space in the very early days of pioneering space travel, and the whole story revolves around an old space probe that has gone rogue and that may be threatening Earth. And can we crowdfund the space force that we need to correct the problem? It's a short story. I don't want to give away too much of it, but it is amazing. It touched every lever for me. I loved it. And then the next one is from Asimov's, and it is In the Lost City of Lang by Rudy Rooker and Paul DiFilippo. And it's an unconventional choice for me once you know anything about it, because it's a Lovecraft pastiche. Fairly detailed, fairly worshipful Lovecraft pastiche. And the reason that's a little odd for me is because if you've watched this channel, you know I'm not a big fan of Lovecraft. But it's the story of a Boston Globe reporter, in the early part of the 20th century, who goes on a exotic expedition with a madman and an adventurer and an alien in order to uncover more aliens. And they encounter elder gods straight out of Lovecraft, and there is it's a fantastically engrossing story. There's also a weird scene towards the end. I guess you could almost call it outside my comfort zone. I think outside of the comfort zone of probably any human. but I loved it. I was engrossed with it. I miss subway stops in a way that, to be completely fair, in a way that science fiction and fantasy novels don't often do to me. The short stories, every single month, at least once in each one of these publications. It's incredible. And then the last one I want to mention is in fantasy and science fiction. There's another square-bound journal. And it is the best of the 3. It's called Freezing Rain, A Chance of Falling. And it's by L.X. Beckett. And it's set in a mildly future time in which the social media rules the world. In which there are strokes. Everybody has upvotes or downvotes, strokes. And they all keep cybernetic awareness of their social media standing. And it determines everything. And the main character, when we meet him, has had a horrible mishap happen live, of course, in the live streams of the world. And the whole world knows what happened. There was a horrible mishap in one of his live streams that has caused his social media accounts, bank account, balance, what you want to call it, to vanish almost completely. He has almost nothing. And he has a manager, and he has a whole crew of people, and he's trying hard to rebuild that number because it means a lot. And he gets, in a desperate attempt to rebuild that social media standing, he hooks up with someone who seems to be helping him, but she really has her own agenda, and it's horrifying. And you'd think that all of that William Gibson type stuff would be the main draw for the story, but the main draw was solidly emotional. The main draw had nothing to do with the incredibly good social science fiction pyrotechnics of the story. Instead, it had to do with fathers and sons. It had to do with emotions, the emotions of the main character. I loved it, absolutely loved it. Don't know what the recourse is for finding short stories online. I guess you have to wait and hope that these authors will either elaborate them into novels or bring out a collection of short stories. Or you can just find these issues, back issues, I guess, might be cheap on Amazon. I didn't check before I made this video and before I recommended them. And that's an oversight on my part, because usually when I recommend something, I also like to give you a straight path to getting it if it sounds like it's your cup of tea. I'll have to look into that and maybe leave something in the show notes, or maybe you can tell me. Then we go on to a great pair of questions here. Question number 7 is mass appeal. A book you'd recommend to a wide variety of readers. And in his video, Adam says that he doesn't think there's a book for all tastes. And although Adam is, our dark priest, he's wrong. I have read many. The only reason he's saying I don't think there's a book for all tastes is because he's reflexively thinking of the stupid made-up stories. And of course that's true, because they're dumb and trivial to start with. But if you move to the deep end of the pool where all the adults are, with the martinis talking about mortgages, in other words, nonfiction, you can find plenty of books that will meet any standard of readerly engagement. And one of those is something I praised on this channel a million times. It's a book by Ryan North called How to Invent Everything. And its conceit is that there is a company that makes a sort of a sofa with a bubble over it that is a time travel device. It can take you to any point in human history. And the book, How to Invent Anything, is a help manual that the company issues to you once you've invested in this time travel device. On the outside chance that the thing malfunctions, they of course take no liability. But if the device malfunctions and strands you in Mesozoic, in Paleolithic Europe or in Renaissance England or whatever, the book is designed to give you a primer on all the stuff that you need to know that they don't know then. How does a vacuum tube work? How does your lymph system work? Where exactly is your pancreas? How do you know where to find gold? That sort of thing. It's amazingly wide-ranging and totally fun, and it's full of illustrations. It would appeal to anybody. I defy anybody to pick up that book and not love it. So there you go. But question number 8 is the opposite. Question number 8 is specialized appeal. A book you liked but would hesitate to recommend to just anyone. You need to gauge first who you wanted to recommend it to. And I have many such books. There are many such books. I tried to pick one, the one that stuck out for me the most. And it's this. It's by Roland Jackson, and it is The Ascent of John Tyndall. It's a big, fat, serious biography of a great Victorian polymath, an explorer, a mountaineer, a writer, a science popularizer, an actual scientist who broke a lot of ground in a lot of places. Back in the Victorian era, when it was possible still for public intellectuals to be omnicompetent, to just know all kinds of things, where if you'd said to this man or any of his contemporaries, some of whom we know by name, you don't know his name, but you know a lot of his famous contemporaries, if you'd have said to them, what's your specialty? He might have taken it personally as an insult. This author does a fantastic job. This is just an incredibly good biography. But you can see the problem, right? It's not the same thing as a biography of Jackie Robinson. I can't just hand this to somebody because the author does a great job. He builds this on a detailed study of the mid-Victorian era, and if you don't know anything at all about that era, if you come at this just cold, you might not like the book. You might not, and you wouldn't dislike it. You just wouldn't keep reading it. So this is one of many specialized recommendations that I have to make, unfortunately. But that was the number one, because that was the one I enjoyed the most, that I finished it. And my first response when I finish a really good book is, ooh, I want to hand this to somebody. And with books like this, the books that Adam had in mind for this question, you can't do that. You end with that reaction. Your reaction is totally positive. The author would beam if they knew that they'd provoked that reaction in you. But the follow-up, the natural follow-up, is to want to rush out into the street and put it in people's hands, and you can't do that with books like this. Or the book that Adam mentioned on his video, Dennis Cooper. You can't put Dennis Cooper in your grandma's hands. Or if you can, I'd like to meet her. But anyway, that is that is the two mass appeal and limited appeal, specialized appeal. Then we get to question number 9, which is reflect on your year as a bookish content creator. And that's a huge video on its own, in a video that's already long. Of course, that's hundreds and hundreds of videos that I made for BookTube in 2018. It's also hundreds of book reviews that I did for various venues, in this country and in other countries, all throughout the year of 2018, and all sorts of bookish adventures that I had at bookstores with editors, all sorts of stuff like that. 2018, I will be reflecting on it a few times in videos to come in the next week, but it was largely a good year for me, certainly on this channel. Oh God, I will be talking about this channel in detail. This channel, I had an enormous amount of fun in 2018. Enormous amount of fun. Did a whole bunch of things. Took a whole bunch of notes. Oh, in fact, as you can tell, I'm almost out of room in my BookTube notebook. So, what I need you to do is go looking around your house, dig into drawers, find a notebook that's all blank, that you don't use, they haven't used, you've had it, and you haven't touched it in years, and send it to me, because I'm going to need a 2019 BookTube book. But so I will go into great deal of detail on looking back at 2018. But just in general for this question, 2018 was a very good year for me, bookish content-wise. I broke into a couple of new venues. I wrote a lot of reviews that got a lot of reaction in just the ways that I like. I don't really care about the going viral or anything like that. The two reactions that I really like from my reviews are, one, if I write a positive review and the author really likes it. The author says, "You got my book. I'm not just purring because you praised me. I'm happy because you got my book." Not apart from whether or not you liked it, you understood it. You understood what I was going for, and thank you. I love that reaction from authors because I know how lonely it can be. And two, and even more important, you. If I write up a book or I recommend a book on this channel and you invest in it, take a chance on it, and come back and say, "Boy, oh boy, was that a good recommendation. Thank you." That is gold to me. That means the world to me. And that happened a lot. Both of those happened a lot in 2018. So I'm very happy about both of those. And that's it. That is the BookTube Postscript Tag for 2018. And obviously we can keep doing this year by year. This is a great tag. And all left for me to do is tag people. Adam tagged a slew of great people in his video. Just wonderful. In fact, I wanted to make a point. I'll leave a link to Adam's video. If you go to his video and you look at the list of people that he tagged and you don't subscribe to any of them, you should subscribe to them. These are some of the best booktubers we have, so please do. But I noticed, I noticed a couple of names that weren't on there. Probably because Adam hates you, probably because you smell. So I thought I would add those names here. Marc Nash, for instance, our novelist on BookTube. Words Everywhere, who has returned. Rather triumphantly, if you looked at his videos. Todd's Bursting Bookcase, of course, you must have answers to all of these. Books I'm Not Reading, and Old Blues Chapter and Verse, rapidly becoming sort of the ma and pa of BookTube. Everybody loves them. Nashwa, of course. God, you must have plenty of answers to these things. Justin at Ghost Reader. Of course, the guys at Strip Cover Lit. If you do tags, I'm not really sure how often they do tags, but this is a great one, and it seems right up your alley. So I'd love to hear, especially a tag team. That would be so much fun. And of course, the Bald Book Geek. This has been a year on 2018 on BookTube. This has been a year. Let's talk all about it. All the books. I love these kinds of things. So that's it. I'm going to wrap this up, but we have plenty more to talk about. So I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.